When I went to this studio, the kinds of art this guy was doing, like, it was fun, it was cool. Definitely remember in that moment though, like, I want in. I look back on them in a weirdly fond way now. At the time, I mean, they were the darkest years of my life. Japanese police decided that they were gonna raid a bunch of tattoo studios and arrest all the tattooers. I was like, is this the universe just telling me that this was all a bad idea? Should I just go back to the United States, smoke weed, and live on the beach in California and do tattoos and never care about this bullshit ever again? Like, I was there.
Thanks for joining us on Unpacking Japan, proudly produced by our team at Zen Studio with the long-standing support of Zen Group. To keep these weekly stories coming, please consider subscribing. It's the best way to support the show and really makes a difference. And now, let's get into it. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I have the pleasure to welcome Hori Benny. Thank you very much for making time to join us in our studio.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
You're a tattoo artist. You're the owner of Invasion Club,
yes,
which is a growing name in the tattoo community here in Japan. And people come from all over the world to get pieces from you and the people you work with. You've kind of developed your own tattoo style too over the years after following a long apprenticeship in Japan.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll have plenty of interesting things to get into. But like with all my guests, I want to understand a little bit the backstory and what brought you to Japan. Because I think from what I know, you didn't come here to become a tattoo artist.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, I did not originally have it in mind to become a tattoo artist, but I did want to come and visit Japan. So the very brief version was that I think it would have been, I had visited Japan a couple of times in the late 90s. And then I decided I think I want to come and try living here for at least 6 to 12 months and see how I like it. And the short version is that turned into about 25 or 26 years. But originally I just wanted to come here and experience life outside of the United States. Mm-hmm. And so I took a teaching gig and they placed me in Kagoshima, which for those of you who don't know, it's in the southern tip of Kyushu in the south of Japan. And it was kind of during that time when I started evaluating what I was doing with my life, and I wanted to do something with art. And I started meeting tattooers here and there. And I started observing what they were doing, how they were living. And it was very enchanting to me. I thought this is the kind of life I would like for myself, being able to do art for a living. Of course, it's every artist's dream. And it definitely was for me. And so I sought out an apprenticeship in Osaka a couple years later. And then that's where I moved. And so, that was the trajectory for me.
So this was a short story, but you said a couple of interesting things there.
Sure.
And the first one that I want to understand is you wanted to go out of the US to explore another country.
Right.
Why Japan? A lot of people might consider Europe, or maybe you go to your northern neighbors of Canada, or down south to Mexico, or elsewhere. What was your interest in coming to Japan specifically?
Yeah, well, I kind of neglected to mention the part where I was interested in Japanese culture. So I came here in 2001. That's when I actually made the move. 2001, 2002, something like that. And before that, I was studying Japanese language because I'd been introduced to, of course, to manga and animation. But the first exposure I had to like animation and manga, like I was so young. I was like 12 years old. When I was a kid, they had something on TV that they called Robotech, which was a bad translation of like Macross, but we didn't know what Macross was. And I think like it was the 80s and Japan was still going through that economic animal phase. And so I think I had a friend I think his dad went to Japan on business and brought back like some VHS tapes of stuff he randomly recorded off TV.
Oh.
Or so, in those days we didn't have anime conventions, we had sci-fi conventions.
Yeah.
And of course I was, a nerd at 12 years old. So I went to that, and they had like these bins of videotapes, that were like 4th or 5th generation copies, which means they've been dubbed over and over. And so it was just like random tapes that would just say Japanese animation, or in those days they used the term Japanimation, which people don't use anymore. That's a deprecated term. But anyway, I think I had one of these tapes. Somehow it came into my possession, and I just remember through the scan lines seeing things like Urusei Yatsura, or Ranma Nibun no Ichi, or Macross, or Akira, or things like that. And that was very, very, I should reiterate, I was like 11 or 12. Like I was very young to be exposed to some of this stuff. And I was like, what? For context, in those days, the only animation that was really on, on the menu for people in the United States, this is like pre-internet too. So it was like Disney animation or like
Cartoon Network.
Yeah, Cartoon Network hadn't even really started when I was that young. Okay. Cartoon Network started when I was older. So like, but for context, this is probably 1989, 88, 89 when I first started really getting exposed to it. And so I was kind of also, entering my early teenage years. And of course, it was extremely attractive to me. And then I started like, what is going on in this country with Japan? What is this storytelling? What is this? And of course, I loved drawing. I loved art. Mm. And so I was already collecting like American comic books, but as soon as I discovered this stuff, I was like, oh my God. So I dove in head first. I mean, that's the long way around it. So I'd already developed this interest. And then at least in my home state in the United States, at the high school I was at, we were required for our requirements to study a foreign language for 2 years. It was just part of the recs. Now you could choose, like most people in the US choose Spanish, French, or German or something. At least they did in those days. But there was a pilot program in my home state where you could study other languages like Russian, Chinese, and Japanese. Wow. And I thought, wow, like for my requirements, like maybe I'll start studying Japanese. So I took it for 1 year in high school. And then it became almost an obsession to try to dig up stuff that wasn't making it to the US market, because now there was starting to develop this like market for animation and manga in the United States. And probably abroad, but I'm just speaking from the country I was living in, right? So these things, you would get what was kind of served to you, what was on offer. But then I started trying to like get things from Japan, like if I could. And there weren't really like these reseller services back then.
Like the one that we are working with.
Like exactly, like the one we discussed earlier. Yeah, Zen Markets. But so there was nothing like that. And so it was like a challenge. If I somehow knew somebody through some kind of a family thing or somebody that I met outside that like had some kind of connection to Japan, like if you go there, can you look for this thing? And we...
So in the end, you decided to go by yourself, and we were like, well, if it's so hard to source, I might go explore Japan by myself and kind of try to find a way to live there, or first through a few visits and then on the JET program.
I organically, that's how it happened. Yeah. So I think I left high school early. And went to university straight away through a program that my state offered. So I actually graduated from university pretty early. I think I was out by the time I was like 21. But while I was still going there, that's when I decided, okay, like I'm gonna at least like take a trip. And I came and visited Tokyo and Osaka in that trip. And I was just like completely blown away. There's so much context now with YouTube and social media. People have so many outlets to explore. Before coming, yeah. And so people are already looking up the restaurants and the food and the culture. But back then, I mean, I know it sounds very silly to say this now, but I think, I don't even know what people had in their minds that was in the average, like, Americans' consciousness about the country of Japan. I mean, I think it was just like, they have trains and salarymen, and there's like,
maybe a little bit about the food, sushi, ramen.
I think sushi and
some
geisha,
traditional thing, like sumo wrestlers.
Something that was a traditional art or something. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't like a lot of. I think there was also this rumor that like they have technology and things are expensive. But I mean, people were kind of coming out of like the 80s. This is the economic bubble had burst, but Japan was still sort of okay, I guess. I don't know. It entered into that weird late 90s.
You said you were blown away. What was it when you arrived on your first few trips that you were really like, oh, wow, this is really cool?
I'm like right away, the food, the infrastructure, the order. I mean, I think these are pretty common things that people say, especially coming from the context of the United States, where there's more personal responsibility versus like shared responsibility in a culture. So, and I'm making broad strokes here, but I think, I mean, just from the moment of getting off the airplane and everyone is in uniform and everybody's like doing their job properly, right? And people are polite and friendly. And then, you're getting on these trains. And of course, Tokyo is like a mega city. I wasn't coming from Los Angeles or New York City. I was coming from Minneapolis, which is, much smaller. So it was also the sense of scale was very different. So, I was also young. I think the first time I came to Japan, I was like 18 or 19. 19? Anyway, when I first made that visit. So like, of course it left a huge impression on me.
Yeah.
And then, going out to like izakayas and hanging out and meeting people. Back then, there was a lot more nightlife in Japan. I mean, there still is, but I think more because people had, garakes, they had flip phones, but they didn't have smartphones. So, and there was no social media. So like you'd go out on like a Wednesday night and like there would be people like out talking to each other outside.
Socializing instead of socializing.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, and of course, as a nascent like language learner, right? It was a great opportunity to get out there and meet people and practice and stuff like that.
When your first impressions of Japan are these big cities, Tokyo, Osaka, and you kind of are blown away and you get attracted, you want to come here. And then you apply for the JET program and you end up in Kagoshima, which is a lovely city, but
yes.
I would say a very stark, there's very stark contrast with those two cities.
And just to interrupt, it wasn't Kagoshima City, it was Kagoshima Prefecture.
So somewhere in the countryside of Kagoshima.
Yeah, on an island.
On an island too, wow.
Yeah. So that was, it was definitely not what I had pictured, but I was just so psyched that I got the job. And I was like, I'm going to Japan. Like, this is going to be so awesome. And it was. I'm actually very, very fortunate, I think, that I got to have the experience of living in the countryside and seeing how people live and work and how communities and families operate in the countryside. It was a really great experience for me. Of course, the city and like life was calling me back, but I think just getting that other view of Japan that's a little bit off the beaten path.
Was your experience here living in Osaka, mostly now in Tokyo, but starting out on this island in Kagoshima, would you say that it's perhaps even better to get a good sense of the culture of the people and to adjust to life in Japan and really integrate yourself into the communities by starting out in the countryside as opposed to suddenly arriving in these big cities that are international, that have international communities where you may not need Japanese language as much?
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I swear I'm not going to say this the entire interview, but I will say it one more time. Just one more time. The context of no social media and no smartphones just cannot be overstated. It was just so different. Without having anything like that was constantly distracting. Like for example, I settled into my house and, they came and picked me up and showed me around because, they were welcoming me to their island. They gave me this welcome dinner. It was very lovely. They dumped me off in my house and then I'm sitting there alone in my house and I'm like, now what do I do? Right.
No phone to pick up, no Instagram to log into.
Not really. So. We had early internet. Like there was MySpace and stuff. But, I was also determined, I'm going to make friends in this country. And, it was very quiet. Again, it's the countryside. I just heard some drum beats in the distance. And I was like, what's going on? And I remember this being this real sliding doors moment. Am I just going to stay in my house and go to sleep? And then I was like, I want to find out where these drums are coming from. So I just got out and started walking and I walked down toward the ocean and there was a bunch of dudes and it was fathers and sons and things like that. And they all had these giant taiko drums out and they were practicing by the beach under the moonlight. And I was like, this is so sick. What are these guys doing? So I went up and I'm like, hey, what's up? Of course, I'm the only foreigner on this island. Probably there's only at that time 7 foreigners in all Kagoshima. You know what I mean? So I go down there and these guys are like, oh, you must be, obviously the new English teacher, right? So yeah. And then they're like, oh, we're practicing for this town festival. And I mean, they really adopted me in that moment. And, again, it's a smaller community. I mean, most people are on the island are still related because their families go way, way back. So it was, I think in that sense, just to bring it back around to your question, yeah, when you're in a city, especially Tokyo, which is a mega city, it's easy to become anonymous, even if you don't want to. Sometimes you want to, but sometimes you want to have, community and be close to people. And that can be challenging in a big city, especially in a place like Tokyo where many people are moving from elsewhere to be here to succeed at something. They've got some kind of a dream they're working toward. And they don't have a lot of time for chit chat and small talk and unstructured hangouts.
So you arrive on this tiny island in Kagoshima, you meet the drummers, you kind of get into the community. You said at the beginning when I first asked you about how you got to Japan that at the time when you were in Kagoshima, you kind of discovered the tattoo culture here and these tattoo artists.
Yes.
How did that happen? Because if you're on this tiny island, I imagine the tiny island might not have a tattoo artist on there immediately. How did you kind of get into seeing how the tattoo artists live and discover that to the point that a couple of years later, you're like, I want to do an apprenticeship?
Okay, so there is a small missing piece of the story that I'll fill in. When I was still living in the United States, when I got accepted for the JET program, they generally say, okay, well, you're going to be going, but it's going to be in like 8 months. So that's like 8 months where I'm like, I was working at a design firm. I quit that job. And then I started looking around like, well, I need to like pay my rent, but I want to do something fun. I don't want to jump into like another office job. It's not for me. And it turned out that there was a local tattoo shop. And my roommate at the time, she was like, hey, we have this guest coming from Japan and like, you know, Japanese, can you help and like come translate for him? And so I met this gentleman and got to know him. And I sort of maintained that connection. So even after he flew back to Japan, after his guest work stint was over, once I was in Kagoshima, you know, I was, of course, looking for excuses to go to other Japanese cities, to go visit like Fukuoka and Osaka and Hiroshima and wherever I could go. So I was like, hey, can I come, you know, see your studio like up in Osaka? And so I went and checked it out and I started, you know, getting to know all the guys at the studio much better. And so I knew that eventually that contract that I had with teaching was going to run out. And even if it didn't, I needed to turn the page on it to something else because I'm like, I want to do something that's has to do with art. Like, this is my life. It's my one chance. So I reached out to these guys and I was like, you know, when I'm done, can I move up here and can I do an apprenticeship here? And they were, you know, they were pretty against it. You know, not really against it, but I mean, they were like, because, you know, you don't know what you don't know. It's an unknown. And I think I was very starry-eyed and apple-cheeked and thought, oh boy, this is going to be, I'm going to come and have this happy life and do tattoos. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know anything about the tattoo world.
Before you found out about the tattoo world, what is it that gave you those sparkly eyes that kind of attracted you? You said that you liked the way they live, you liked the way they do their art, their crafts, and you wanted to do the same. What aspects of what you've seen by visiting those studios kind of really motivated you to pursue that career?
It's hard to say it was specifically one thing, but I can say that one time, it wasn't the Osaka studio, but I went to visit a studio that was in Hiroshima, and it was run by this guy named Hidero, who unfortunately has passed away. But when I went into the studio, his studio was decorated with like Gundam robots and figures, and he had this like, you know, TV in his studio where he was running sci-fi movies and animation movies. Like I think Ghost in the Shell Innocence had just come out or something. And he was like running that. And then he had, because my image of tattooers was this much more serious, you know, Japanese wabori type of a thing where it was very stoic people, you know, sitting on tatami mats, you know, wearing kimono, things like that.
The very traditional tattoo that is often associated with the Yakuza, maybe.
Right.
Where they kind of maybe hide in unlabeled apartments and very traditionally by hand tattoo the full body suits or the full arm. And
Right. And so this was not a transition period, but well, I guess you could say it was a transition period, a period where tattooing was just starting to come out into the open in terms of like a public facing studio that people could come into. So that didn't really start until 1997, 98. I mean, so it was a new phenomenon. And to a certain extent, certain studios, Yakuza were still involved, right? And they were still a principal clientele of some of these places. Now, of course, I'm not speaking of anyone in particular, but when I went to this studio, it was like the kinds of drawings, the kinds of art this guy was doing, like it was fun, it was cool. It was a lot like the art I used to like to draw when I was living back home in the United States. You know, I was drawing like flyers for punk rock shows and band covers, you know, for my friends' albums and things like that. And stuff for zines and, you know, little shitty comics that I was into, right? And so it was really, really cool to like see like, wow, you can draw this stuff. And then of course, while we would hang out there all day, then friends were coming and going. And of course, I'm still in this very young, you know, mindset where I'm trying to socialize and meet people. And so like I'm meeting all these cool people in Hiroshima and everyone's, you know, paddling down, you know, this guy, like he's got this entire group of friends around him. Like he's this artist, like all these people adore him. Like he's doing art on their bodies. Like there's this like cool community. It was just like all those aspects were attractive. He had cool Rock and Jelly Bean posters on his walls. You know, he had like, there was just like, you know, funny stuff he hung up around his studio. It was a very personalized space. And being in a place like that has so much artistic energy, I think you can really feel it. It's not like, when you're...
And you realize that this can be done here in Japan too.
That's right.
This kind of more modern, eccentric, community-based space where people do art and share a very intimate moment too. I mean, getting a tattoo is something very personal that lasts forever. And I guess you share a lot of moments and memories with the people that come into the studio too.
That's right. There is a strong communal spirit to it. And I definitely remember in that moment though, like I want to be part of this. I want something like this for myself. Like I didn't even realize like that this kind of life was even possible. And so that's what set me on the path, I would say.
And so then you keep calling and like, hey, I want to do this, I want to do this. And the guys say, no, you better go and continue the JET program or find another salaryman job.
Right.
Like, no, I want to do this. And you end up with a chopstick tattoo.
That's right. Yeah.
Where you do your apprenticeship. What made them change their mind and finally accept you to come on as an apprentice?
So I think it was just persistence. The fact that I went up there over and over. And then initially it was only like a trial type of a thing, right? Where, I worked there and basically you do all the duties of a shop manager. This is very common with tattoo apprenticeships, right? So I'm going to say it again. There was no internet, no smartphones. So for example, there was no Google Maps. You had to use phone books. You didn't have Uber. You had to like call places and order things off menus, and you had to fill out all the paperwork by hand. And so like doing that job, it was actually really great for me because it got me used to doing phone conversations in Japanese. If my writing like wasn't good, like if I couldn't like write certain kanji, they would like make fun of me, and that would really like be like, damn it, so it really like encouraged me to study a lot more. Yeah. In a tattoo shop, sometimes you're dealing with people who can be a challenge to deal with. And then you have to learn like, it turns out not everyone's a nice person. Not everyone's a mean person, but there's different people and you have to learn how to deal with them in different situations. Some people speak in such thick Osaka ben, like I couldn't understand it. And it really put me on the back foot. So I ended up being in this situation where, someone would call, they're like, hey, I can see a 7-Eleven. Where's your studio? I'd have to either guide them by being like, look for this thing, then turn here, which it was like a boot camp for my language abilities in like a way that I wasn't quite expecting.
In a sense, a very good starting way to start to kind of familiarize yourself with the world and kind of improve the language skills, get to know the area because I was new coming from an island, suddenly being downtown Osaka is also...
And I think a lot of Japanese apprenticeships or shugyo go this way, right? Where in the beginning, of course, they're not giving you a tattoo machine, right? Of course, your job is to like remember whose shoes are in the genkan for when they leave, right? Of course, your job is to make the tea and put it out for everybody. Of course, your job is to order the food for the senpais and things like that.
When you start out with this kind of trial and you help out with the organization of the studio, at what point do they say, okay, we'll take you on a proper apprenticeship? And kind of, was there like a sort of contract that you could actually sign at the time that was like, okay, you're going to be a official tattoo apprentice and get a certificate after that? What was in place or how did it work at the time?
No, there was no contract. This was all the gentleman's agreement, shall we say. No, what happened was after I was there for a while, for context, this was a large studio and it had several artists in it and a lot of them had their own apprentices. So it was people who had their own kind of, tattoo families, but everybody was working together under one umbrella, if that makes sense. And so there was one individual there named Wataru, and I really liked his style and what he was doing. And so after I was there for a couple of years and I wasn't quite... I was struggling to kind of please everybody in the studio and also to fit in. And there were so many people there. And of course, I was the bottom of this totem pole. So everybody was my senpai. So you're in a situation where like there are deshis and shishos, apprentices and mentors, shall we say. And then there's, like two owners besides. And then, if somebody says, hey, do this, but then that contradicts what somebody over here says, there's literally no way you can do your job properly and like please everybody. And so it really was challenging to navigate that and then wonder like how much of this is the situation, how much of it is my lack of language ability or my lack of cultural understanding. It was very hard to tease those things apart. But yeah, eventually Wataru took me under his wing and as his apprentice. So it taught me how to tattoo.
Before going in there, you were starstruck a little bit. You were dreaming about doing that. Suddenly you have those first couple of years that are very difficult, where you're basically the kohai of everyone and they just tell you to do all the dirty work. Can be stressful as well, the language and everything. Sure. What made you persist? Or was there moments where you're like, do I really want to do this here? Maybe I should do something else artistic in Japan?
In some sense, now that I have like 20/20 hindsight and I have some decades behind me, I can be a bit more objective about it. I mean, those were without a doubt I look back on them in a weirdly fond way now. At the time, I mean, they were the darkest years of my life. I am not going to lie. I went through a period of food insecurity, shall we say. I lost my place to live. I ended up being on the street for a time, but I couldn't let anybody know that. Uh-huh. That was, I mean, like, without getting into the whole sordid story about it, I mean, that was crazy because I think I was just stubborn. I think I thought, like, if I don't do this, I'm not saying this is the right way to think about it. I'm just saying this was my mindset at the time. If I don't do this right, I'm a failure. I'm going to go back home like a dog with my tail between my legs. How can I face, my family? Everybody I meet's going to be like, hey, weren't you going to be this tattooer in Japan? Like, it was too much for me to bear that.
So you just kept it to yourself?
I think like people around me knew, right? But at the time, I mean, of course, by then, I wasn't really communicating with any of my old friends in the United States at all. I really went dark at this part of my life. I wasn't talking to a lot of people from the United States at all. Also, it wasn't just like easy to contact people. You couldn't just like phone somebody. So
Otattoo taking you on his apprenticeship was kind of like, maybe the turning point of things a little bit.
It was the turning point. And then from there, it creates like accountability and responsibility. And then again, like he gave me a much more structure. So I remember one of the tasks he gave me was, if you're familiar with it, we have something called Tattoo Flash.
Yeah.
And so it's like generally a large piece of paper with several designs on it, and lots of tattoo studios in the old days would hang them up and people would come in and like they could pick something off the wall. But it's also a good way to just practice drawing things, and not just practice drawing like the way I always like to draw in sketchbooks, but stuff that would be practical for a potential client to walk in and take home with them. So the task was, I think I had to draw, I think it was like, was it 5 or 7 pages, like a week? And they had to be like colored with watercolor. And so I was just, not only was I doing all the shop stuff, but I was drawing my ass off. Just
staying late into the night.
Oh man. I mean, there was like, in this period, I was not sleeping at all. To this day, I covet my sleep more than anything. Wow. I get my 8 hours of sleep. I take care of me first. But in those days, no, it was like, I would be lucky if I got 2 hours. And of course, when you don't get sleep, you start making mistakes. And it increases your stress. Of course, I'm not recommending this to anybody. I'm just saying that's just how it was. But again, it was a very, it was a kind of a boot camp. How many? It was over 200 sheets that I produced before then. It was like, okay, well now, you can start practicing, doing small things like lettering. Well, first, they let me practice on myself. So I did some tattoos on my legs.
So I wanted to get to that. You start the apprenticeship by doing this kind of trial, running the shop.
Yep.
Then you get taken under Wataru's wing, and he basically adds to your task to do a lot of these flashes
Yes.
and do a lot of illustrations and drawings. How much later do you start learning and practicing how to actually ink someone?
I mean, everything kind of goes step by step. So what you may or may not realize, like while you're doing this, although it was explained to me this way, is that when you're doing things with, like watercolored or colored pencils are pretty close analog in some ways to traditional tattooing or tattooing with, coil machines. So you're already doing the motions. Sometimes, I would even take the pencil and where the tube fits into the coil machine, I would slide the pencil in there. So I'd be drawing with this weight on the back of my hand.
To kind of get the balance.
Exactly. Now, of course, this is, a lot of the way that tattooing as a technical craft has changed in the last 2 decades. But I think it's just the sense that like they really stepped me into it. And then, of course, as I said, I started tattooing, small things, simple, black only, no color, just to make sure I could do like, competent line work. And then doing small things that like look nice and would heal well. And then like the color would be done right. So it was step by step, right? And then of course, as you get comfortable with things, at first you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. But then as you get comfortable, you want to start experimenting and branching off.
Do you remember the first tattoo you did on someone else?
Oh God. Yeah, I remember the first. I specifically remember the first time that I did a tattoo and was paid for it. And it was on a gentleman. He was I believe he was a bartender at a local bar in Osaka. And I'd mentioned that, hey, I'm looking for, people to work on. And this is after I'd been practicing for a while. So I had done practice tattoos. But then they were like, it's all right for you to start charging people money. And of course, he wanted some like lettering that went around his ankle. And I remember trying to hang that lettering straight around that guy's ankle and it taking like hours. And then when I'm tattooing it, people involuntarily twitch. Yeah. And when you tattoo different body parts, different things happen. And so a lot of humans have a tendency to, on their legs to twitch.
Okay.
And I remember I'm like tattooing on this guy's like ankle and he like twitches and like his foot just goes bonk and like bonks me like right in the nose. And I remember like in the end being like, looking at it and it was, it was the best I could do for what I could at the time. And like, it was fine. And I remember he was like over the moon about this thing. He loved this tattoo. And I remember like looking at this, like, man, all this stuff that had happened up until that point, this wasn't me arriving. This was me arriving at like the start line.
What's the timeline we're talking about?
So this would have, by this point, I was like 2.5 to 3 years into this thing. So there were definitely some moments where I thought either they were going to can me or I was going to give. I think I wanted to give up like every day.
So you get to the starting line, you tattoo that guy. What goes through your mind before you start? Because this is the first time you're going to do something that's going to be permanent on someone else. If you mess up, that person is going to be with your crooked line or whatnot for the rest of their life. Is it something you think about at all? Or you just think about, I'm going to make a piece of art like you've done many times before?
Not like if you're speaking about like today, then the answer is just another Tuesday. I don't think about it at all. People do twitch, things do happen. So when people say like mess up, it's important to qualify what people mean by that. So for example, if you intend to pull the line this way and it goes just slightly to the left by 0.5 millimeter, there are things you can do to make sure that that's not, a problem. But like, in terms of like a major mess up or you just like, I don't know, fall asleep while you're tattooing and like go across the guy's face or something. That's almost never a concern. Of course, in the beginning though, yeah, it was more like my reputation's on the line. This guy's going to have this on him the rest of his life. Like, what if I don't do a good job? What if? And there's all this, kind of ambient dread. And really the only way past it, I think, is with any skill. You just got to go up there and start taking swings, until you get comfortable with it. And then the more of those rules that you hardwire, the more natural it becomes. And then after a while, like now I don't think about those things like at all. And what's great is that frees me up to give more time to the client in the sense that when we sit down and we discuss like what kind of a design we're going to do or what the story for their tattoo is going to be. Of course, I prepare much differently now. I have people like send me photos of the area to work in. So I'm designing the piece from the very beginning to fit exactly on their body where it's going to go.
And I imagine nowadays you also maybe have like software where you can visually kind of apply it somehow. Whereas at the time...
Oh, yeah. So that has changed a lot. Everything that I learned with was analog. And so it was a lot of tracing paper. Or I used to take... what I would do is I would like... spray the person's leg or their arm or whatever with ethanol. Then I would put like some plastic wrap on it. Then I would like draw the flow lines with like a marker. Then I would take that off and put it down on like a piece of paper. Then I would take some tracing paper over that and trace those contours.
Wow.
So, but I mean, again, this is sort of that interim time between when people were doing all of, like Japanese wabori stuff and more kind of like Western style, or more like, I would say like non-Japanese tattooing. And so a lot of these techniques were informed by that. So whereas now, yeah, I mean, of course, if the person sends you a photo, you throw it into your paint program on your iPad, and you can make the layer like semi-transparent, and you can just go right over it or whatever. There's some artists today, I don't do this, but people even take 3D scans using the LiDAR on their iPhone.
Wow.
And then they've got the full complete. I feel like for me, that level isn't like quite required, but it just is a testament to how far tools have come.
So for you at the starting line, the way forward is just tattoo, tattoo, tattoo. And you
It's
said at the
pretty brute
beginning,
force, yeah.
you have to start with like simple things, and you gradually add complexity to it. At the core, throughout your learnings and maybe what you've seen and what your tutor was teaching you, what is the important part of a good tattoo? You said that early on you had to practice how to make a clean line, but what is for you like the most important part of a good tattoo?
I think what's more, I don't want to say more important. I think good technique, competent technique. I mean, that has to be the baseline. I think what's more important, though, for me personally, is style and personality. And those aren't things that you can brute force. Those are things that are informed by your lived experience and the things that you input into your own life, the things that you consume, the experiences you have, the people you meet. And then eventually, because as you practice more, you are able to do more and more things, almost to the point that you can do so many different things that you're like, what do I choose? And in that sense, it's like being a director. The director's job, isn't to sit there with a megaphone and point at people and yell at them and tell them what to do. The director's job is to take responsibility and to make decisions and take responsibility for those decisions. And so that's what you're doing. So for example, maybe this client doesn't have quite the shape that you imagined or quite the skin type you imagined, or maybe there is some other tattoos that are in the picture. Well, now you've got to kind of, pivot and change. And even more so than that, though, it's the story that goes into it. So I do a lot of custom characters for people now, where people send me their ideas for characters. So rather than doing a lot of existing anime characters, anime IPs, I try to get people more interested in, like, if you could have like your own custom character, like what would that look like? What kind of a character do you like? And that is very, very fun, because you're really drawing something personal out of the client. And then I'm putting that through my lens of my experience, and then I'm putting that back out there. And that has been probably the most rewarding types of tattooing that I've done. Of course, I've, done a lot of amazing and fun pieces over the years, but that's really been a sweet spot for me. And I'm very fortunate and privileged to be able to do that in my career now.
So you're able to do this today with your own studio in Beijing Club, to which we're going to get in a little bit.
Sure.
But at the time, you still have to find your way, right? So you practice, you work with different clients. The first client you had was over the moon with what you did, but I imagine not all clients are that easy. And you said some of them can be difficult to deal with. Did you have some situations where the tattoo itself maybe wasn't the challenge, but how do we work with this client to get to the end result? Right.
Again, I'm going to paint with a broad brush here, but you're dealing with human beings. And of course it's obvious, but I think it's very important to be aware of that every day that you enter into this job. So I think in the beginning, like here's an example. Like, for example, let's say you're just starting out and you get somebody and they come in and they want to get like a little something. Well, what the Japanese at the time would call a 1-point tattoo, which would be like, I don't know, like let's say a little infinity symbol or something, right? And if you don't know what you're doing yet, you don't always know how to like suggest to people like what the best kind of play. Because some people, they just want a tattoo and they don't really know. Some people are like, I've got a whole tattoo life plan. And some people are like, I just want a tattoo. I don't even know what I want. And so from the very outset, right? Before you even get the person in the studio, you're already trying to figure out who is this person? Where are they coming from? What do they want? What are the expectations? How will I manage those expectations? How will I inform them with my technique and experience? And how will I deliver a result they're going to be happy with and I'm going to be happy with? So that's like the road that you're on. So if somebody comes in, they want something small. Again, this is in the beginning of the career. Maybe they're going to sit there and they're going to kind of like suffer over it a little bit in the mirror. Like, do I want to hear? Maybe it should go up a millimeter. Maybe they shouldn't. And there's a tendency when you're like, oh, just pick a spot. Who cares? Right? When you're starting out, like it's going to be fine. It doesn't matter. But it does matter. It's on that person's body and they do care about it. And they are going to make you rehang the stencil 5 or 6 times. And like, I think I remember in the beginning being like, you know, like annoyed or put out by it. Almost that I had forgotten, like I'm the one who's struggling here. I'm the one who's working hard. You need to trust me. I know what I'm doing. Right. But that, of course, that's not the right attitude. You know, that was, you know, that's the attitude of a beginner 25 years ago.
Now, in hindsight, it's always experience. Are there situations where a tattoo is just not possible? You should not do this because that shape on this placement or this shape or this tattoo on your skin type is not going to work. It's not going to give the client the look they want. And you have to kind of like really work with them to change something or maybe even sometimes convince them to not proceed with something.
Sure. Again, I will paint with a broad brush here, but let's go all the way back and just say that like tattoos are art. And I'm not really the type to believe in rules. So for example, if you want to do it, you can just do it. Like there's no tattoo committee. There's no tattoo government that's going to punish you if you do it weird. But I suppose it goes back to like my own experience and sensibilities. For example, if I think I can see what the client's going for, or maybe the client doesn't know. Like they don't know that if you don't make the tattoo a certain size, you won't be able to get a certain level of detail. But I know those things. And so the point is just like when I'm in dialogue with people to be like, I see what you're saying. And if you do that, this will happen and we can mitigate it by doing this or that. And I think that would be a better solution. And when you present people with options that way, like 99% of people are going to be like, you know, amiable. Amiable? Uh-oh.
I did see on your current studio that there are some type of tattoos that you don't do.
Yes.
For example, you don't finish another artist's work, which is totally understandable. But also, so you don't do things like from covering up some tattoos or scars. Why did you decide to kind of exclude some certain types of work?
So I'm fortunate enough that in my position at this point in my career that I can choose my clients, that when I open my books up, the requests come in and then I'm going to take the long way around to answer this. I apologize. Like I've only got so many years left and I want to spend those years doing the types of work that are going to be the most fulfilling for me and like-minded clients. So I want to, in other words, I'm prioritizing those people. And it's not that I'm above doing a cover up or anything like that, but it's just that I did those things for like 20 years. And I got pretty good at cover ups, if I must say so myself. And getting good at cover ups is great because it teaches you, like, if you do something that, let's say, isn't ideal, like you go like one little millimeter off that no one would, but you would notice, knowing different strategies is going to help you make your tattoos, you know, you can go back and refine them and change them on the fly and they're going to look probably even better, right? So the reason that I just don't do those now is just straight off the bat. It's like, you know, before you take your, because we have people fill out, you know, a form. It's like, before I waste your time by having you fill out this form, I'm going to tell you right away, like, here's what I'm focusing on. And I try to use social media, not as well as I wish, but that's the other avenue that I like to use to let people know, here's what I'm focusing on now. Here's the kind of stuff I'd really like to prioritize. But I also encourage people to send, you know, 2 or 3 ideas, you know, to not be shy. And to really tell me like, hey, like, this is what I've been thinking about, because like when those people come in and you really deliver on that, it really creates this virtuous cycle where it does tend to bring like-minded people back as clients and repeat clients. And I've had the privilege of getting to know a lot of those people over the years personally, and it's been very good. So it's not about excluding people, and it's not about saying you can't do cover-ups or you can't go over scar tissues, but it's just that it's not really what I want to focus on anymore.
So now, as you said, you have the privilege to focus on the things you like because you've got a loyal customer base and a lot of interested people in working with you, and they're interested in working with you at your own studio.
Right.
If we go back a few years towards the end of your apprenticeship, at what point did you start feeling like you were ready or good enough, or like, I want to do my own thing here in Japan?
So when you work for somebody else in any industry, at least for me, speaking for myself, there comes a point where, especially in a place where there are several people that are above you, and you start to hear conflicting messages, and you're trying your best, but I was in a situation where it was just like, I would look around me and see, like, if I was running the show, I wouldn't be doing this, I would be doing this. Or I wouldn't be doing that, I'd be doing this other thing instead. And after a while, it became something that I just couldn't ignore anymore. And rather than fighting somebody in their own studio, a studio which, by the way, helped me get my start and helped me get my career, it's like I need to spread my wings. And it doesn't matter if I'm even 100% confident. Like, I did work for that studio for 10 years. Yeah. Which, generally speaking, this is generally speaking, in Japan, I think, even for a shugyo, like that's pretty quick, right? Sometimes they expect you to stay like even longer and pay back all those skill fees that they helped you acquire. But a lot of times with tattooing, like 10 years is generally like, at least back then, that was sort of like
short.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I went to them and I said, I just want to spread my wings, and they gave me their blessing, and so that's when I left and I formed Invasion Club.
So you formed Invasion Club, and
a club of one person.
A club of one person. Before we start talking about the club itself, I want to understand what was actually the legal framework around tattooing at the time when you start opening your shop, because the tattooing itself has a lot of history in Japan, a lot of stigma attached to it as well. And therefore, I imagine a sort of legal framework that was making it easier or more complicated to do tattoos. So for you, especially at the time as a foreigner here in Japan, how did it work to set up a shop? What were you allowed to do? What were you not allowed to do? I know, for comparison with Korea, to my understanding, that they require you to have a medical license to basically tattoo someone, which is therefore limiting strongly who is legally tattooing. I don't know if it's changed since, but that was kind of what I had read before. How was it in Japan?
So it has changed in both Japan and Korea since then. I mean, can I answer this question without speaking for like 3 hours is the question. I'll give you the short version. Japan is an old country. It's much older than the United States. Japan has gone through all sorts of different governmental structures in its time before it was even a nation state. And during those times, tattooing has changed with Japan. So even when you're talking about the Jomon period of Japan, I mean, back when I don't even think they had imported writing from China at that time. People are making clay pots with ropes and things like that, right? The Jomon people. Even then they had tattooing.
I think there's an artist, I don't know where he's located, but he still does these very Jomon style tattoos. Is he in Kanazawa or?
I don't know exactly where he's based right now.
But big black lines and
Yes, and of course there's no written or historical record based on what the Jomon people were like. We only have scraps and fragments of that culture. So he has gone on to sort of reconstruct like what his vision of that is, which I think, by the way, is really, really cool. I think it's cool to go all the way back to, I mean, you're really reaching across time to try to get at like the essence of something like that. And of course, it can't be like it was in the Jomon period, no more than Japanese tattooing today can be like it was in the Edo period. Now, of course, like that's where a lot of the roots of what people think of as traditional Japanese tattoos are based out of, but it's a much older practice than that. It just so happens that during the Edo period, that's when Japan was in the Sakoku Jidai, when it was cut off from the rest of the world, and that's when that culture flourished. So you're tracing this line that goes back a long way. And during the Meiji Restoration, they changed laws in Japan, like, we're outlawing things like circus performers, and men have to grow beards, and you can't have these top knots, and no more walking around with swords, and tattoos, that's a no-go, because they didn't want to appear uncivilized to the Western, whatever that means, but you know what I mean. And that was one period where tattooing, was going underground. And then, of course, since that time, there was an entire World War or two that were fought, and the landscape changed again. In Japan, tattooing in Japan was in this real gray zone, shall we say, to use their own words, where it was generally a custom that was practiced and protected by the Yakuza. And they're really the ones who kept it alive through this period where it was being suppressed. It was really, again, I think where there was a cross-pollination between Western and Japanese culture that started, in the 70s, 80s, and then kind of really popped off in the 90s. I think that's when people started being like, you know what, I'm just going to open a tattoo studio. And that was something that was still really the purview of the Yakuza. Well, it went on. And then eventually there was a case where the Japanese police, the Osaka Prefectural Police specifically, decided that they were going to raid a bunch of tattoo studios and arrest all the tattooers. I had just left. I had been on my own for about 1 year when this started. So they raided the studio that I used to work at. I was brought in and questioned by the police.
What did they ask about?
Everything. Mostly the Japanese police, when they call you in, first of all, they want information. They want to know who's who and what's going on, and they want to wrap their heads around what the situation is. Now, there's speculation about what the police were really trying to do back then, if it was just an excuse to go after somebody else. But lo and behold, one of these tattooers, because everybody was scared at this time. I had just started my own studio. I was like, am I just going to is this the universe just telling me that this was all a bad idea? Should I just go back to the United States and smoke weed and live on the beach in California and do tattoos and never care about this bullshit ever again? I was there. But at the same time, I'd also really started building my life in Japan. I didn't, want to quit. But everybody was feeling that way in Japan, everyone that was a tattooer. And of course, Korea had something similar that was going on that was almost in parallel. But I'll just keep it to Japan for now. So what ended up happening was a certain tattooer decided that, this is bullshit. And they sued the police. And that's something that's, Japan is famous for its 99% conviction rate. And it doesn't seem that you would be able to beat the police in court. So what happened was, the short version is he actually got a bunch of constitutional lawyers on his side, including some people from Kyoto University. They won against the Osaka City Police. It got escalated, in the Osaka Municipal Court. Then it got escalated to the Prefectural Court and they lost. Then they escalated to the Japanese Supreme Court. And Japanese courts move very, very, very slow. And so I think it took them about 4 to 5 years to hand down a decision. And the decision was that this is not medical malpractice. And, you're not guilty. And that was a huge wave of relief for people. But tattooing is still an unregulated industry in Japan. And there's always been talk that eventually the Ministry of Health and Labor is going to bring in some kind of standards and licensing and things like that. But I think right after that, COVID popped off. And I think since then, if I'm being real about it, I just think that Japan and the world have larger problems right now.
So is the court case the one you're talking about, the one that was kind of headed by Taiki?
That's right. Yeah, that's the case.
He's the one who did my tattoo.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
So that was a story that was introduced to me when I kind of got tattooed, that he was the one, and I was shown all the papers on the news because I didn't really know.
I did.
So that really took quite a few years then to kind of get, because just before COVID that ended. That's
right. And a little point of history: I did Taiki's first tattoo.
Oh,
yeah, which is really crazy to think about.
Because he's got plenty now.
Yeah, yes, of course. It was rough because there wasn't a legal precedent in our generation for it, and nobody really knew what to do. And then of course, one tattooer decides they're going to do something one way, and then other people are like, no, you shouldn't do that because that's going to affect everyone else this way. And it was this whole thing. It really had a lot of people on the ropes. I'm glad that it went the way that it did. It could have gone very differently. For context, just to bring it back to Korea for a moment, Korea just at the time of recording here recently decided like, yeah, it's not medical malpractice. So it will take some time in Korea for that to trickle through the system. But this whole idea of having to, hide in secret places and work, like that's ending. So it's a good sign.
So the tattoo community won that court case, but you mentioned that the industry is still not very much regulated. So if we go back to when you established your shop, what were the requirements for you to establish a shop? Were there like a licensing system that you can operate this category of business here in Japan, or what were the requirements for you to establish yourself?
So because there really are no specific requirements, now I happen to be a permanent resident of Japan. So in my situation, I registered a company. Also, I should just as a sidebar, me being a foreigner does make things different. Foreigners who live long-term in Japan are expected to meet the obligations of the average Japanese citizen. So you have to pay your taxes, you have to pay for your health insurance, and you have to pay into the pension scheme. So that's the baseline. Then having permanent residency, then starting a company, then probably paying company taxes, and really just establishing a framework and sort of building a base for myself. It's like, yeah, you could rent a property to me. Like I'm going to, operate in a way that's like moral and within society's boundaries and not cause meiwaku to other people and things like that. Meiwaku? Nuisances to other people. Yeah, exactly. So there isn't specifically like, here's how you move to Japan. Here's how you become a tattooer. Like that isn't a thing. It was a very strange path that I took to get here that I could not have told you that this is how the path was going to turn out when I started out on it. So there is not really an easy framework if you don't already have like your visa straightened out and things like that.
When I asked you earlier what was important or what made a good tattoo, you said that, well, you've got the technique, but then it's about developing your personal style and kind of creating something unique. So you've got Invasion Club and you kind of developed this kind of Otattoo. Otaku tattoo kind of style that you're also known for. How did that really come to be, and how did you kind of develop this as part of now being independent and being able to do things the way you wanted to do?
I think the way it started was like many young artists, I was trying to find my style. Not that I even knew what that question even meant. I just knew I wanted to have something that was unique to me. And, usually you begin where most people do by just, doing what everybody else around you is doing. And so in the beginning, of course, I was doing all Japanese designs, which isn't to say I don't love those. Like I do love them. But after a while, it's like, how do I make a koi fish or a dragon or a phoenix look like it was my koi fish or my dragon or my phoenix? How do I give that my own flavor without it being so out there that it looks like I don't understand what the canonical styles really are? And so that it's a lot of practice, a lot of internal struggle. And then after achieving kind of some level of competence with it, again, as the days, weeks, months, and years start to go on, you start to wonder, like, I just started getting a little bit, curious. Like, can I do something else? Can I do something that's more fun? Can I do something that's more challenging? Like what there's got to be like another step. I think that's very common for artists. When they get comfortable with something, they want to step it up, or they feel drawn to something else. And in those days, for context, this would have been the mid-aughts. So 2005, 6, 7, somewhere around there. Once in a while on the internet, you would see like a really bad anime tattoo or something. And I remember looking at those. There was only a couple of them, but they got famous on like internet bulletin boards, because for sure somebody who was like, an otaku, probably in the United States, brought in like a anime character and was like, hey, can you tattoo this? And the guy probably just did the bare minimum and took the guy's money. And then everyone on the internet's making fun of it. So not only did this guy lose his money, he got a bad tattoo, plus the internet's mocking him. That's shitty. That's terrible. Whatever the opposite of that is, like, that's what I wanted to do. Can you make it so that the person has a good tattoo that people might not even, they might think that whatever, being an anime fan or an otaku is like cringe as fuck, but like this guy's happy with what he has and you're happy that you did it, And of course, and you also got paid.
For someone who, I imagine a lot of listeners or viewers might have seen some of your work, but for someone who has not, how would you describe it? What would you say is the essence of some of the imagery that you're tattooing?
How would I describe my own work?
Yeah, to someone who's never seen it.
God, I mean, I don't want to take the easy way out of this one, but I think it was like, what did Frank Zappa say? Like, writing or talking about art is like dancing about lasagna or something. Like, it's very, I don't know. I know that's a cop-out. It's very difficult, I think, for me to put that into words. There are things that I think I value. I mean, so much of it is like nonverbal. It's its own medium of communication. So a lot of things that I think come out in my work, a lot of themes, the way I do my lines, they're informed by, as I mentioned earlier, the experience of my life. So, some of those things, includes experimenting with psychedelics. Some of those things includes a mix between, American comics and Japanese manga, right? This cross-pollination of cultures, a synthesis of all the things that I've taken a part of. And of course, as a lot of people know, like I'm a huge fan of art. So whenever I go to another country, I always make it a point to visit the museums. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. None of us I haven't done anything. I've got the entire history of humanity at my back with all this art and culture that we've produced. And, I'm only taking my own influences, and then I'm saying, I think this is worth something, and I think that's worth something. So I suppose if I wanted to put it strictly into words, I get a lot of inspiration from fashion. I get a lot of inspiration from it's really all across the board. There's a certain element of eroticism that figures into my work. A lot of those things are too spicy to post on social media, but that's definitely a part of, my history and where I come from.
You mentioned art a lot and how important it is and how it influences your work. Once you establish Invasion Club, you're also a business owner.
That's right.
You've got to tattoo people to make art, but you also have to pay the bills. You mentioned how important it was to pay the taxes system. How does that pressure and responsibility then affect your work? Or perhaps not at all, and you kind of had a plan in mind?
I did not have a plan. It morphed into this situation that it is today based on various inputs outside of my control. I would say it is hard. It is hard because if I'm stressing about whatever, let's say the government has some new policy that's going into effect, or like inflation is rising, or there's a war that's starting up somewhere that's affecting oil somewhere on the planet, right? Like, these things are out of my control. They're above my pay grade. The United States doesn't give me a call and ask me what we should do with our foreign policy, but these things affect everybody here nonetheless. So I have to mentally put those things outside of my mind. And then, said another way, my client is showing up for me. So I try to show up for my client. So I have to do my best to put all of that paperwork stuff outside. The way that I do it now to handle it is because that kind of code switching back and forth between the artist brain and the Excel spreadsheet brain, that's hard. And anybody out there who's ever had to do it knows. And the only way for me to do that's been effective, and I'm not even saying this is just what has worked for me, is I schedule the days to do that stuff the same way I schedule my tattoos. And so if this client, I'm working on this client from 1 p.m. until whenever this thing is done, even if it goes past midnight, that's their time. And then when I have to do my accounting stuff, I'm like, okay, that's this Thursday at the end of the month. And I just do it at that day. And I go somewhere, to a cafe or somewhere where I can just throw in my headphones and I just suck it up and do my spreadsheet stuff. Because if I'm trying to take a break from my tattoo, I'm oh, now I've got to do this other thing. That code switching is the most stress inducing thing imaginable.
Yeah, difficult to switch focus from one moment to the other. You started Invasion Club. You mentioned jokingly as a club of one at the beginning.
Yeah.
Did you have a vision for what you wanted this to become at the time already?
No, I did not. I knew only in the sense that, as I mentioned before, when you work for someone else, you start to realize we all have different values. We all have different principles. We all have different I would say I was by that point really developing my own ethos for tattooing, and really understanding who am I really? What is tattooing to me really? And not in a bullshit way that you say to other people to sound cool, but really, what does it mean? In my heart of hearts. And once I understood that I need to build a place where I can make that happen. Now, of course, that ethos has evolved over the years. But in the beginning, no, there was like no solid plan. But it was in the sense, okay, well, in my studio, we will definitely have this thing and we will definitely not have this other thing. And not only things, but, policies and principles that I want to hold up for myself.
What was your ethos and to what did it evolve over the years? Where is it at today?
Where's it at today? I think a large part of it would be that the art comes first and that results are important. And if it means the best possible result, the best possible outcome for both the client and myself, and really for the vis-a-vis the work, that's the goal. So of course I want the person to leave happy and fulfilled and glad that they came to me and spent their time with me and trusted me with something that's going on in their body. And so that's something that I try to uphold every time. If I think that that's something that I don't think I would be able to show up for and give 100%, then I wouldn't take that person as a client in the first place. As opposed to when you work in a street studio and you're getting started and they're like, just do whatever comes in the door. It's all about, getting a person in the chair and making money. Being in that mindset, it's not a very conducive mindset to art. Now, I think when you're getting started, it's a good way to get your chops. And of course, I'm not saying anything against the ethos of other people, but it's no longer my ethos. And again, I say that from a position of privilege that has just come from, I think, being consistent with my clients and showing up for 25 years. And hopefully people continue to show up for me.
When you establish yourself after having worked at another studio in the same town and you start building your own reputation,
sure.
What's the community like among tattoo artists and tattooers? Because before we started recording, you mentioned sometimes some people like to make a distinction between one term or the other. So what's it like, and maybe specifically in Osaka, where there are quite a few studios, some of them well known, including yours. But do people like to exchange work, talk to each other, or is it more like to each their own kind of little piece of the of their own gallery, so to say?
It's an interesting question, and again, it is a bit context dependent because of the time that it was. So, I think in those days, of course, in order to be a tattooer in Japan, I mean, you really had to puff out your chest and be like, I'm sticking my flag here in the ground, like I'm going to do something now. And then in some sense, there's some sense of community, but, not everybody is friends. Some people, are straight up rivals. Some people, keep to themselves, and some people lash out. And there was a lot of that. If you wanted to look back at it with rose-colored glasses, you would say everyone had a lot of boisterous energy back then. And there was some, friendly competition and things of that nature. I think now the landscape is very different, and social media has just kind of flattened all that. The idea where everything was so, as you say, it was very localized, right? So when everything was focused in Osaka, it didn't really matter what somebody up in Hokkaido or down in Kyushu was or Okinawa was doing. It didn't really affect you. But in your own town, maybe it did, especially in a town like Osaka, which is more compact than Tokyo. So in some sense, I think that community is important. Without community, it's kind of hard to build a culture. You cannot say that you built a culture all by yourself. No one has ever done that. But at the same time, I think especially now, I'm just not in my 20s anymore, I'm really I don't see other artists like these people are my competition and I'm in a competition with them. I'm in a competition with myself.
Just try to get better.
Yeah, or more true to myself, or better, and not better I can do this more competently now. Just better in the sense that I can really get at the essence of what I'm trying to do in this piece. I can really put some story into it. I can really take this up a notch, for myself. At the end of the day, and people who share that ethos, and there are those people out there. Those are the people who have come and joined Invasion Club now, and. We don't have the largest studio, but I'm very, very happy with the crew and community that we built internally. And of course, there is a tattooer community, and sometimes it's fun to mix with those things. But I find that there is a wider berth of people who share art values that are in other industries.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we started doing events that were like otaku-based tattoo events in Osaka. I think one of the first ones was called Otattoo Nights. And I started experimenting with this idea of like a mix event, especially since people had more of a tattoo allergy back then in Japan, and there weren't as many foreigners here. So for example, I met a guy who was like, people had just started doing like anime music DJing.
Oh.
And they weren't like proper DJs. Some of them were, but some people were just like, I just like anime music. What if I DJ'd it? And I'm like, well, I'm like the tattoo guy that's like, what if there were like anime tattoos? I'm going to be that guy. And then there was a guy that was like, I'm going to make like sweets and cupcakes and cakes. I'm going to be a patissier or whatever, but they're going to be like otaku based. Well, so I started meeting these people when I discovered some of these anime music events popping up. And I was like, we should do a mixed event together. And when you do an event like that, it softened tattooing, I think, a little bit for people who are scared of it. And there are a lot of people in Japan were, and maybe even still are scared of it, right? Because they have an image of it, a stereotype of it. And then it also kind of works in the opposite direction. Again, it's that cross-pollination thing where people who are like, I'm just into tattoos, seeing that, oh, like there's stuff about, anime and manga that's actually really interesting. I think that's why you see, a lot of, J-pop and hits that get really big. Like they're usually openings and endings for animations. That's how they get some of that clout. Like it's this real like amalgamation that's happening. And so that was really fun to be on the forefront of. Mixing those cultures and finding people who share those values and a common love of a culture and an art.
As you mix all of this and you start meeting those people and the community grows, I imagine the demand for Invasion Club grows, and there comes a point where you're like, I can't handle this by myself, and you maybe it was your turn to take on an apprentice or to kind of have other tattooers come to tattoo at your shop.
It was more organic than planned. So I only have one apprentice that I ever took on. Her name is Chappie. She's wonderful. She still works with us. It's been about 10 years, and she's amazing. And she was a client of mine that I was tattooing before I went off on my own. And after I'd been on my own for about a year, she came and she was like, I want to learn how to tattoo. And because I'd already tattooed her like 10 times, I'd done her first tattoo, like I could tell like she is serious, right? So I remember I was like, bring in your drawings and show, kind of show me what you've got. And so she came in and she brought a single drawing of like this monster claw hand holding like an eyeball. And I was like, is this what you got? She's like, that's what I got. And I was like, okay. But man, I will say, I said, all right, tell you what, take go buy a sketchbook and write down a few goals that you have for yourself and just bring it into me tomorrow. We'll just consider that like your first homework assignment. And she came in and she had written in characters this big, she had completely filled the sheet out of all of this stuff. Like, I want to get good at lines and a good color and learn how to do shading. And she had just like, and I was like, wow, okay.
She really wants it.
She wants it. Yeah. This kid is hungry. And so, and boy, talk about somebody who's risen to the occasion. I could not be more proud of her. Built her own clients, built her own reputation, like committed to staying as long as it takes to just get, doesn't require any kind of, supervision, anything like that. And I mean, of course now, like, we're all older. I mean, she's a grown adult, but it's taking on her as an apprentice was probably the most gratifying thing I ever did in my life.
How was that experience for you, having gone from being an apprentice yourself in those difficult years of yours to now being the teacher and passing on the knowledge you have gained to someone that may have been, or you may have seen a little bit of yourself in her, wanting to really become that artist here?
Sure. I think that, again, speaking broadly, if you want to know just how incapable and incompetent you truly are at something, try to teach it to somebody else. And that's humbling. That was very humbling for me. It made me think that even after 10 years, I'm like, it is way too early for me to be teaching anybody anything. And I learned so much through that experience. I learned how to, I had never had a subordinate in my life before, somebody that, I was in a position, where like I'm in the, as you said, like I'm in the teaching seat now. And, people ask you questions and you're like, I was just winging it. I thought I had this. Like, I actually don't know how to answer this question. And not to overstate it, but just constantly getting humbled like that really, I think, helped me build up the studio the way it is now. That was really the learning experience.
Your studio has expanded. You've decided to open up in Tokyo too, not so long ago,
did.
and also relocate there after 2 decades in Osaka. What spurred the decision to suddenly move to the big city?
Because I love suffering. No, I don't know. Well, I do know. So as we talked about earlier, I had my studio in Osaka for I've been tattooing at that point for 22 years. I had the studio in Osaka for 11 years at that point. I think it was this idea, I mentioned this off camera, but Osaka, I love Osaka. What a great town. It's like a warm blanket. This city adopted me. It made so many things possible for me. People were so kind to me. As an adoptive country, Japan, it's been wonderful, but Osaka has just been it's given me, I learned so much about people. And as many cultural differences as there are between, for example, the United States and Japan, at the end of the day, we're so different and yet so the same. As you travel around the world, you work in an international company, I'm sure you've seen it. It doesn't matter where you go. I think a lot of what people really want, which is, people want to work at a job where they feel fulfilled. People want the best for their families and for their offspring. And those are very common things. And so Osaka really kind of made Japan less mysterious and exotic to me and really made it my home. And I became very comfortable in this city. And it got to the point that as we started making more and more friendships with tattooers overseas and strengthening some of those bonds, I began to really question, is this going to be the city that I die in? Have I done everything that I really want to do? Have I really challenged myself the way that I want to? And we had started doing, for example, collaborations with our clothing line and some other things. And a lot of those plans came from, big swingers up in Tokyo, people who are coming from outside of our industry. So, things directly with the animation industry or with some of those department stores, who we worked with, like Parco. And I just found myself coming up to Tokyo more and more. And of course, it was always sort of undeniable that Tokyo is the economic center of Japan. And when it comes to planning, that's also the same. Now, of course, Osaka has a heart. I really do feel but
there's more happening in Tokyo.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, yes. I think a lot of amazing, wonderful things are born in Osaka. But I think that in a lot of ways, even in the interconnected era that we live in now, I think you really need the connections, the people, the planning, and the financial support that you can really only get in Tokyo. Now, I'm sure someone's going to fillet me for saying that, but this has just been my experience to the point that, of course, I still have the studio in Osaka, but I just feel that there are more opportunities for us to continue to grow and do more of what we love doing here as well.
So opportunities for growth in Tokyo, but practically speaking, how much of a challenge? You said you like suffering. How much of a challenge was it to actually expand and establish yourself there in a city where, in a way, you're known and established, but you're the new guy to Tokyo?
Sure.
And you may have to suddenly find your way and you find your own place in the city where a lot of other people are also trying to make things happen.
I mean, I suppose I was being a bit facetious. I don't truly love suffering, but unfortunately, I think sometimes suffering is an outcome of growth because you have to challenge yourself and you have to do things differently. And despite having, over 2 decades in Japan, of course, Tokyo is a completely different beast. And when I got it into my head that I was going to open a branch up in Tokyo, I had begun working more closely with a friend of mine. Her name's Laura Anunnaki from Mexico, an amazing tattooer. And she had mentioned wanting to move to Japan. And I was like, let's see how we can make this work out. So I worked and put together a case file for her. Now, she's already had an amazing career on her own, but I worked to get her work visa to work for our company, and then to get this branch started in Tokyo. And then another one of my friends in Tokyo, she's like, if you do that, I'll close my studio and I'll join Invasion Club.
Oh.
And I was like, in my head, I'm like, I can see it. I can see this now. And it gives me a chance to be able to go between these cities and work. So it was, of course, a very like, it's one thing to see like the result that you're kind of hoping for, but it's another thing to logistically put those steps together in a row that makes sense. And of course, as you might imagine, trying to rent a property, the first thing that any building owner is going to ask you is, what is it you want to do in this property?
Two people.
That's right. And it's a non-starter, but you have to go through this procedure, this humiliation ritual of applying and rejection and applying and rejection. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out here listening to this who have been through this. I mean, it took us 3 years.
3 years.
I would say 2.5 to 3 years to like from the moment that like of inception. And again, I was busy with other projects in this time where we're doing clothing releases, we're going to conventions overseas, other things are happening. And so I had to just be like, you know what, I'm knuckling under, I'm cutting every project off. I am not going to stop. This would have been 2025. So last year, like I'm not stopping until I've got this place in Tokyo. And I think I worked with like 8 realtors.
Wow.
And I finally got this kid. For me, he's a kid. He was like 25 or 26. So anyway, they have a certain kind of hungriness that old people don't have. And he just got on it and he was like, I'm going to get you a place for, and I think that guy in like 5 or 6 weeks got us this amazing location in Yoyogi, which is 5 minutes from the south entrance of Shinjuku Station.
Cool.
Yeah, it's banging. We're lucky to have it. It's an amazing building, but of course, a building is just a building. And the real challenge was, getting everyone that I'd been talking with, like, okay, like this is happening now, guys.
Now
we all got to come together. Yeah. And then of course we got to learn to like, work with each other in like a new way and like build the studio out the way we want to build it. And there's been, of course, a few little growing pains here and there, but I think now that it's been about 6 or 7 months, like I'm very, very happy with how things have come along.
How many people are now in this club of one?
In this club of one, so of course, I would say of our resident tattooers, including myself, there's 4 of us. So there's 3 up here, and then Choppy now runs the Osaka studio.
And then I imagine a couple of guests, tattooers, tattoo artists coming from time to time, maybe.
Sure, and I should also mention here our. I don't want to mention only our resident artists. I want to mention like all of our managers. So we have Laura has her manager Michael, and we also have a manager in Tokyo, Poyo, and we also have our long-term manager who manages the entire. She's the concierge of Invasion Club, which is Kili, and she's based down in Osaka.
Okay,
but I mean, without those people to really do a lot of hard work behind the scenes, I mean, I couldn't do what I do every day.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier you like to have a specific day for the accounting and such, and it's all nice and good when you get started, but when you have 4 resident artists and you have so many people working, you need suddenly a structure all around it. So
yes.
For you who you have these big plans, you have these dreams, you want to take on more interesting project collaboration, you set up your shop in Tokyo, but at the core of it all, your ethos is still, it's the art comes first. So where's the art at now? Which direction are you taking it now that you have the opportunities to be in these 2 cities, to be connected with so many other creators?
So like a lot of people, I've been inspired by a lot of the art that I grew up with, and a lot of that was based in anime and manga. And one of the first things that I saw when I was young, it was Daikon film, and it was also Aim for the Top Gunbuster. These are animations that were the beginning of a studio called Gainax, and the directorial debut piece, which was Aim for the Top Gunbuster, was by Anno Hideaki, who's a famous animation director that a lot of people probably know for like Evangelion, I suppose. And they did a retrospective gallery of his work here in Tokyo. And it was like 3 gymnasiums full of stuff. And it was like the stuff he grew up with, which was like Star Blazers and Star Trek and old sci-fi and tokusatsu stuff, right? Like live action, like Ranger kind of stuff. Then it was the stuff that he made, which was, he did some stuff with Studio Ghibli. He did stuff on Macross. And then, of course, he did all the stuff that he did at Gainax. And then he eventually, formed Kara, which is his new animation studio. And then it's the stuff that he's doing now. And what he's done is he did, of course, like Shin Gojira, Shin Kamen Rider, Shin Ultraman, which, the Shin means new, right? So he did his own take on these classical things that he grew up with. In other words, this guy's not going to let Godzilla and Ultraman and Kamen Rider like die off. Like, he's trying to take them into a new generation. He's put all this effort into making a museum that preserved this stuff. He had stuff on display there that like Toei Animation like had gotten rid of, because I don't know if they had money troubles or what was going on, but like he's preserved a lot of this stuff. And I was really inspired to see somebody who doesn't just take from culture. He's informed by it, creates something himself, and now he's trying to do something to preserve it. I mean, like, how cool is that? I'm not saying that I am anything near on this guy's level, or that I've done or accomplished anything that's nearly, on that scale. But I love that. And I feel like that's very in line with what we try to do too, right?
Preserving culture by imprinting it on people's bodies for the decades to come, in a way. And
participating in culture and evolving with it. I think being a participant in human culture is one of the best things that we can do as human beings. It's a method of messaging and communication that stretches across time, and it binds us together. And it's something that I'm happy to be a part of.
When you look back at the hungry self of living in Kagoshima, wanting to become this tattoo artist, and you see where you are today, is that something you had ever even conceived?
I could not imagine. I could not imagine saying, yeah, one day I'm going to, be running two tattoo studios in East and West Japan, or that I'd be going to international conventions, or that I'd be working with a team of amazing people. So many of those things, so many things, like, I mean, everything in life, we think we're the authors of our own destiny, and we're not. At best, we're out on a boat at sea, and you can try to steer the rudder, but you can't control like the storms on the ocean, and you can't control the waves. You just have to do your best to pilot it. And it's very rewarding to stretch my ocean analogy here, to be on a ship with a good crew of pirates who think the same way.
So with that ship and crew, what's the next island you'd like to get off at and do something?
I actually am not trying to overly control that so much. I think for me, it's about finding some of the other amazing ships at sea.
Sounds like a One Piece story.
I knew that was going to happen.
Growing the crew while navigating the seas and just taking sideways to other islands wherever the wind blows.
I do think there's a reason that a story like One Piece resonates with a lot of people. I wouldn't even call myself like a huge One Piece fan or anything like that, although I did read it for like the first 30 volumes when I first moved here. What do you think the One Piece is? Are they even? Are they still looking for the One Piece?
Yeah, they're still looking.
Oh, they're still okay. They haven't forgotten about it.
No, they're still looking for it. It's getting quite complicated, but I think it has to be. I don't know. We can theorize, and I'm probably no One Piece expert here. I might be flamed or canceled for whatever opinion I have on this, but probably something very simple. Probably something that goes down to human values or something like that.
As a fake One Piece fan, I'm calling it now. You know what's going to happen? He's going to find this big giant treasure chest, and he's going to flip it open, and the treasure chest is going to be all empty, and he's going to be like, I don't understand. And he's going to turn around, and his crew's going to be behind him. Everyone's going to be clapping, and he's going to be like, oh, this was the one.
Something like that.
If they end it that way, I think people would be upset.
Maybe so, but I feel like it would be in line with a lot of the lessons shared throughout the whole journey and what this has all been about. But that basically, we've been on so many of your journeys and so many of the islands you stopped at, or when the wind took you, met a little bit of your crew that you have now through the stories you've shared. We probably can talk about many, many more topics.
Sure.
But is there anything that was important to you that maybe I didn't ask about that you think maybe that's something else that I'd like to bring up as part of our conversation?
I think it's been brought up a couple of times in this conversation, but it's something that I truly believe. I believe that no man, no person is an island. We are not the authors of our destiny, and anything that I have in my life now that I should be thankful for, which is a lot of things, it only came about through the kindness and the generosity and the caring of others, and people who believed in me and took a chance on me when I had nothing. There was no reason that they should have. I had nothing to show for myself. It's hard to take a risk on people, especially when you don't know like what's going to happen. But I think I think values like grace and humility are very important. And if there's anything I just want to hammer home, it's that I'm very thankful for the people I have in my studio, in my crew, and in my life.
Hori Benny. I think these are beautiful words to wrap up our conversation. And I'm sure people will have more questions, and they may have some simple questions that I have not gone into, such as what was your favorite tattoo, or what is a tattoo that you really want to do, or maybe a tattoo you regret doing. But I think there are other spaces for those questions. And I'm very grateful that you were so open and shared so much of your story today. It was very fascinating to hear. And we'll put the links in the description so people can reach out, maybe book a tattoo if they're interested, to go and see Invasion Club and learn more about you and your work. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you very much, Tobias. I appreciate your time today.
That was awesome. That was really cool.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we could have gone on and on and on.
Thanks for sticking with us until the end. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to Unpacking Japan. It's the best way to help us grow and ensures we can keep bringing you these deep dives every week. Till next time, take care.